In this video, I'm going to talk about is now a good time to buy a house. We're going to see what my crystal ball says about buying a house in this market. Hello, my name's Tyler Ford, Tucson, Arizona with eXp Realty, and welcome to this episode of Living in Tucson, your Tucson real estate connection. And in this episode, I'm going to go over the number one question I've been getting as to what buyers are asking, and that is it a good time to buy a home in this market? But the question really comes down to you. Is it a good time for you to buy a home? And I'm going to go over in detail whether or not it's a good time for you to buy a home in this market. I have a confession to make. So I've been a licensed agent for over 30 years and also an active investor. And investing in real estate at the beginning is what got me into real estate. And my confession is, for me, this is the most confusing market that I've ever seen. Back in 2007, 2008, when we had our last pullback of the market, at least we knew what was going on. We knew the reasons why, and we knew prices were going down. The question is, when would the bottom hit? And so 2007, 2008, the market crashed, and then we went down and sideways for the next 5 years. In the bottom of the market, February 27th, 2012, Warren Buffett was on CNBC and they asked him, in this market, what would you do? And his answer was, I would buy as many single family homes as I could, keep them as rentals and wait for prices to go up. And I'm going to do a little clip right here when he talked about that. But I remember that.
If you are a young individual investor at home and you have your choice between buying your first home or investing in stocks, where would you tell someone is the better bet?
If I thought I was going to live, if I knew where I was going to want to live the next 5 or 10 years, I would buy a home and I'd finance it with a 30-year mortgage, and it's a terrific deal. And if I was an investor that was a handy type, which I'm not, and I could buy a couple of them at distressed prices and find renters, I think that's and again take a 30-year mortgage. It's a leveraged way of owning a very cheap asset now.
I remember that day because I watched it. It was on CNBC, and that was the bottom of the housing market. And at that point, prices started to go up, and they started to go up slowly. And over the last couple years, we've had this blow-up top, in my opinion, that signifies a top where it's what is called FOMO, fear of missing out. And it's more based on greed, where everybody wants to get into the market because they think the market's going to continue to go up. Prices are going crazy. And that's what we've had over the last couple of years. We've had FOMO, fear of missing out. And then lately, there's a lot of fear in the market and what I call FUD. Fear, uncertainty, and doubt, which is now flooding the market. And fear is a much greater emotion than greed. So when the market's going up, it typically goes up a lot slower. But when fear kicks in, markets correct, that correction can happen a whole lot faster. So in this marketplace, people are fearful and they're starting to ask the question, is this a good time to buy? And I'm going to go over that, but it really comes down to you and a handful of things in terms of buying a home in this current market. So let's dive in. Is it a good time to buy a home? So my question that I would ask you, is it a good time for you to buy a home? And I'm going to explain what I mean by that. So if you're experiencing some fear, it probably means a couple different things, in my opinion. Number one, a lot of people, when they buy a home, they save up money and they put the majority of their savings into the home, and then they've got no money left over to weather a storm when and if this market does correct. So if that's you, it's going to take up a lot of your money that you've saved up, and it's causing some fear and anxiety. I would say you might want to wait. The other thing that could cause some fear and anxiety is, interest rates have gone up along with home values have gone up, which from an affordability standpoint, homes are now at the top end of an affordability index. And if the mortgage payment is something that's going to strap you on a monthly basis where you don't have a whole lot of money left over, at the end of the day, that's not fun because you're not living life. So if that's you, I would say now might not be a good time to buy a home. The other thing that could be causing some fear and anxiety is just the marketplace that we're in, our economy. If you're uncertain about maybe a job situation or your income, that's creating some fear, to have yourself asking that question, is now a good time to buy a home? I would say it's not. You might want to wait. So the other big thing that's causing a lot of fear and anxiety is just no confidence in the leadership of this administration in terms of a lot of things that are happening: inflation, mortgage rates going up, the decline in the stock market, which again goes back to having money in reserves to weather a storm. So if any of these things are you that are causing you to ask this question, the better question to ask might be, if I buy a home right now in this market, do I have enough money in reserves to weather a storm when and if something were to happen? So in my opinion, that's the better question to ask. Do you have enough money, at least 6 to 12 months in reserves, to weather a storm if you were to buy a home and something were to happen? Which, in my opinion, it's called sleep factor for me. If it's going to keep you up at night, don't do it. But if you've got money in reserves to weather a storm, it helps what I call the sleep factor and eliminates a lot of fear. So again, I would turn that question around and ask yourself some different questions in terms of why are you feeling that way and whether or not you can weather a storm. I'm a big Dave Ramsey fan, and I follow a lot of his principles, and he recently did a video on YouTube that was really, really good, and it was titled, "Is the Housing Market Gonna Crash?" And in the show notes, I've got the full version here, and right now I'm going to show a little 2-minute clip in terms of the highlight as to why he doesn't think this market is going to crash. And he makes a really compelling argument, and although I agree with a lot of what he's saying, there's parts of it that I just disagree with, because he's leaving some things out of the equation, and that is income and employment and jobs. And if things do pull back and companies start to lay off people or even go out of business, that affects household income, which in turn can have a major impact on whether or not people can maintain paying their mortgages. So again, for me, it's too soon to tell. He makes a very compelling argument, and I would encourage you to watch the full clip.
It's a conclusion I came to, that we're not going to see crash of housing prices. We're not going to see house prices crash because the supply demand just won't allow it. There's too many buyers chasing too few houses, and that's going to hold the market. Now, we have seen the economy slow down, and I do think it's going to slow down. I don't think it's going to be as crazy white hot as it has been. I don't think we're going to continue to see these price jumps in real estate, but that's a far cry from 2008, and we're going to see this huge drop that was unprecedented. The only time in the last 100 years or so, close to 100 years, that we've seen house prices go down across the board in the United States was during 2008. And it was a different set of economic circumstances during that time. So, in summary, let's look at this. All right, supply, there's a shortage of used inventory. Remember, 3.8 versus 3.6 versus 800,000 for sale. Home starts are down. Remember, 2.1 million down to 1.38. Remember that? And foreclosures have been non-existent, down. They're barely starting to come back. And then let's look at the demand against that supply. There's 5 million more millennial buyers in their mid-30s. There's 12 million more overall householders, and investors are buying 1 out of every 4 houses that are sold. All of that is a pressure against this shortage that's going to tell you that we're not going to see a crash in housing prices. This looks nothing like 2008. This looks more like all the other times in history we've seen houses go along and what's happening. The biggest problem we've got is we're going to have a housing shortage that's going to be prolonged over a long period of time. And real estate's going to start to be a real key part of your plan going forward. So we want to get you towards that house. We don't want you to do it crazy. We don't want your emotions to keep you out of control. This supply demand is not going to allow this market to crash. If you purchase properly, this is one of the best times in history to buy right now. a lot better than a year ago because prices were crazy. And it's a great time to sell, but it's going to be more of a normal selling environment instead of an auction where you put your house on the market and get 85 offers in 42 minutes. Okay, it's not going to be, hopefully that's gone, because that's not healthy for the market. It's not healthy. So if you're ready, now's a good time to buy. If you're ready, now's a good time to sell.
Hope you liked that 2-minute clip of some of the highlights as to why he doesn't think this market's going to pull back. And although I agree with a lot of it, to me it's too soon to tell. And a little bit of history of the housing market. So back in 2007, 2008, the catalyst was totally different. We knew exactly what was going on. And U.S. home inventory is about 3 million, right now is about 3 million less than it was at the height of the market during the last pull down. So July 2007 was the high of the home inventory at a little over 4 million homes listed in the MLS in all of the US. And so right now, currently, and I'm going to pull up a little chart right here, there's about 1.3 million active listings in the MLS. So it goes back to supply and demand. There's still inventory shortage, which, if Dave's right, home prices will not crash. And a little bit about the Tucson MLS. If 14 years ago, when we hit the low, which was April 2007, there were 10,387 active listings in the MLS. And moving forward, in terms of when we hit the low in Tucson, was March 2021. There were 928 active listings, and we've come off that. And I would encourage you to watch my monthly. I do a live inventory update in terms of what's going on here in the Tucson market. So inventory levels have come up. We're still low relative to a normal supply and demand. So that's a little bit of history. And again, Dave will be right, provided that inventory levels don't drastically go up. So it's something that I watch. And to me, it's the leading indicator. And if you're really, interested in following the market and wanting to know if it's a good time to buy or not, watching inventory levels is key, in my opinion. Back to the question, is now a good time to buy a home? Only you can answer that question. And again, I wish I had a crystal ball and I could predict the market. I don't. But you need to go back and ask yourself a few questions. Number one, do I have enough money to weather a storm when and if this market pulls back? 6 to 12 months to weather a storm. Is your job and income secure? And if you're answering no to a lot of these questions, I would say right now is not a good time to buy a home. But if you do have money to weather a storm, if you're secure with your income, now, in my opinion, still is a good time to buy a home. And especially if something that I've always done, and it's worked out well for us, is we've been able to have enough money to put down on a 15-year fixed where we can afford the payment. And when you make your monthly payment on a 15-year fixed, you're applying a lot more to principal. And I would encourage you to run an amortization schedule to see how much money you actually save on a 15-year. But if the market does pull back, the nice thing about a 15-year fix, the amount of money that you're putting down towards principal can outpace a declining market. So a lot of things to think about, but again, you got to ask yourself that question. And if you're feeling fearful, there's probably a reason, and my answer would be probably now is not a good time to buy a home. But for a lot of people, now is a good time to buy a home. A 16-foot box moving truck. So if you use us to buy or sell a home, you're more than welcome to use our truck. And even after the fact, down the road, if you ever need to move appliances or furniture, pick something up at Home Depot or Lowe's, you're more than welcome to use our truck. Hope you found this video of value. If you did, do me a huge favor. Give me an internet high five by liking the video. If you have any questions or comments, go ahead and comment below. And for more awesome videos about living in Tucson, your Tucson real estate connection, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. In the meantime, make it a great day.